Hello guys, welcome to lesson number 50 in our drawing series, drawing techniques for beginners. Towards the end of the last lesson, what we started to do was introduce our 2B pencil into some of the darker areas. Now I've gone a little bit further on with the drawing and I've just started to bring out some of the lighter values into the lighter area, so some of the 2H into some of this highlighted area on the hairline, this sort of bulge of hair. I guess it's the fringe. So what we're going to focus on today is I'm just going to start to bring out some of the value now into some of the hand which is holding this torch and working in some of these darker areas, these darker values around the top of it. So let's crack on. I'm going to start off with my HB pencil now. So I'm just going to go over the areas that we've already worked and just using our tapered stroke, I'm just going to start adding some of these slightly darker areas. Now, we definitely want some value in around this area here so that we can then start to bring the 2H pencil towards the centre of this arm. What I've also done over the last couple of days is I've started to organise the actual sessions themselves into sort of the projects that we were working on. So if you have a look under the playlist section on the channel, if you go to the actual channel, click on the channel name and it will take you to the channel itself, and then you'll see there's a section that says videos and one that says playlists. Now what I've done is I've organised each of the projects into its own separate playlist. So if you wanted to go straight to doing the baby portrait, for example, there's a section in there that says baby portrait and all of the videos that belong to that project are in there. So it just saves you going through the entire list of videos if you wanted to find one of the earlier sessions. And obviously we've reached lesson 50 now, which is quite a lot, and I know I've had a few messages from people asking if we could organise them a little bit better than they are, because they're scrolling through many of the videos to find the one that they were after. So I've done that. Have a look at all of those. I will be posting the actual individual playlists up occasionally on the Facebook group as well. If this is the first time you've found the channel, I would really suggest going and have a look for the playlist called Essential Pencil Skills, and that consists of lesson 1 to 6, and it really just gives you the foundation and the basics of what we're trying to do with this pencil stroke called the tapered stroke. It just starts to give you an indication of how we lay down the graphite and what we're looking to do, because obviously some of these lessons they're slightly more advanced and I will be skipping over the surface of certain ideas and things that we've touched upon in earlier lessons. So definitely go and have a look at that. If you've not joined our group, go and find us. It's called Tutorial Tuesdays Beginner to Pro. That's over on Facebook. And we're quite an adult group. There's not been any major controversy, unlike a lot of the other Facebook groups that I've recently seen. I've been members of various different Facebook groups. So I've already highlighted some of these areas with the 2H pencil and a little bit of HB. So I'm just conditioning the paper, and what we're doing is we're building the values up by this pancake effect of different values. So it's almost like stacking pancakes on top of each other. So what I need to do in that area there is I need to bring some 2B. I can, oops, just drop the pencil there. That's marked that. That's a lesson learned. Now we're not going to be able to take that completely out. So I actually just dropped the tip of my 2B pencil there. And it's actually marked the paper. Now actually that, this is very sharp. I sharpened these beforehand, but that's a lesson that we've learned. This is why I don't like to use tortillons or paper stumps, because now I've damaged the tooth of this paper here, I'm never going to be able to get rid of that. I'm going to be able to mask it and cover it up. It's not a complete loss, but if this were a commission that I was doing for somebody, I would be rather annoyed at myself. But these things happen. We do it with the portional dividers and all kinds of things. So just be very careful when you're doing that. But I think that's probably a lesson that we've all learned there, that even people like myself that's been drawing for many years now, we still make these odd mishaps. But yeah, what I was saying was I've reached the limit of the value that I can get comfortably with my HB pencil in this zone. So rather than pressing down and gouging the tooth of the paper like we just did by accident there, what I'm actually looking to do now is just use my 2B pencil and start to layer on the top of it. And as you can see, I'm starting to get a lovely contrast in the value. Now with this layer of 2B that we have now, it's going to then allow me to start bringing some of the value out into some of the lighter parts of this hand and wrist. So it's this constant toing and froing between values that we're working from the darkest areas, and we're bringing the values out towards the lighter zones. And this gives us a lovely way of working throughout the drawing, rather than working one area to completion, which is something that I don't like to do. I like to build the picture up in stages, but sort of all together. So I'll dot around from one area to another. And I'm just looking for those areas that I can either see with my eyes that are the darkest, or I know intellectually, because I understand the way that light works, that they're going to be the darkest areas. So I know that this area behind the thumb is definitely going to be darker because it's further away from the light source. So now what that's going to allow me to do, because I brought some value with the 2B pencil into that darker area, it's going to allow me now to start bringing some of the 2H pencil, which is what I've just changed to now, and I'm going to start being able to bring the value out towards the part of this hand here. I guess this is the thumb, and it's giving us this indication of a rounded shape here. So this is very much like the sphere project that we did. I can see that the light's coming from this direction, and actually I think in our sphere project we were drawing the sphere with the light coming from the top right hand corner. So this is very, very much like the sphere. We've got our core shadow under here, this is our lighter edge, and the highlight is not quite in the centre, it's slightly offset to the right from the centre. But this is absolutely what we were looking at in the sphere project. Excuse me. So I'm being very, very careful not to press on too hard. The temptation is to start pressing harder and harder with the pencil to develop the value. But like I've mentioned in various videos now, various tutorials, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build the value up gently, piece by piece, giving us this very rich, saturated tone, because we've got so many pencil strokes, and these are pencil strokes. I'm not scribbling. I am pulling the pencil towards me, almost like I'm beating eggs. It's a pulling and lifting off as I get to the end of my stroke. So the tapered part is this idea that the start and the finish of our stroke is slightly thinner than the centre part. That's what the taper is referring to in the tapered stroke. Now, one thing that I do want to get across is turn your paper as often as you feel necessary, because what I want to do is I want to build up a series of these tapered strokes, almost like a cross hatching, to build me the value up. I'm trying to keep the lines as close together as possible, and the more you practice with this technique, the more accurate you become. But ultimately what we're doing is we're building up the value with a series of lines, hundreds and hundreds of these very close together lines. But if I start to turn the page now, I can keep my stroke the same way, so I'm always pulling towards me. That's my most accurate stroke. But what I'm doing is I'm building up a different layer of strokes going in a different direction, which is going to give me a much better coverage. So again, this thumb area over at the top here, we've got that same idea that we had with the sphere. This is another contoured, rounded shape, almost spherical in its nature. And the laws of this sphere are exactly the same as what we were talking about in this thumb portion over here. So we have the darkest section towards the left of this thumb, because as the light is coming in from the right, this is where the light is struggling to get to, and it's trying to pay attention to things like that throughout your drawing, getting the directions of shadows, contours correct, that take your drawing to a level of realism that you didn't think, or you wouldn't have assumed that you would have been able to capture when you first started. And with every drawing that you're completing, try and find more and more opportunities with the next one to bring out some of those techniques, I guess you want to call them. So I'm going to start using the HB again now, and I'm going to fade away from the darkest area again, building the value up now. With this tapered stroke, and I'm just applying it very, very lightly. I'm holding the pencil quite a long way away from the tip. And I'm using very, very little pressure. I've got my little finger, the knuckle of my little finger sort of anchored down to the paper. And obviously I've got this wrist action that I can get access to, but in these very tight areas, it's just this almost whisking effect. It's very difficult to pick up on the video because obviously it looks as though on a video that it looks as though I'm scribbling. So I'm going up and down, but it's one stroke after another from top to bottom, trying to keep them as close together as possible. So I've reached the limit of where the HB can go to there now. So I'm coming back in now with the 2H, and I'm smoothing out any work that I've already done, and then I'm just going to bring out the 2H even further. So what we're doing is we're getting rid of these harsh lines between value changes. Eventually this whole piece here will be covered with graphite. You know, even in the very lightest areas of this hand, there's going to be a minimum of a layer of 2H. It's probably going to be a mixture of 2H and HB, but I can manipulate that and get that right by using my kneaded eraser. So when I feel as though I need to lighten an area up, I just use the kneaded eraser and just dab over the top and just remove some of that graphite. Now the only thing that I ever use to move any of the graphite around, I don't use blending stumps, I use this very soft brush. It's a 2-inch very soft brush. I've had this for 3 years now, so you know, you don't need to be buying lots of them and messing around with different brands and whatnot. I guess a makeup brush would do the job just perfectly, or just as well. And what I make sure with this brush is I only use this for my graphite. You can see the end is slightly discoloured, but I have done charcoal work in the past, and I have a separate brush for any charcoal work or any other medium, because I want to keep this only for the graphite work. So I can start to see that the lines are all tending to sit the same way in this section, and I don't want that. I don't want a texture of lines here. We're working, or we're drawing what looks to me to be, it's not a marble, it's probably a granite it looks too hard for a sandstone. But it's a stone nevertheless, and what we have is we have a very smooth texture. I can't see any real weathering on it, maybe only in a few areas around the spikes of the crown. But apart from that, we have got a pretty smooth surface, and we want that to be represented with our application of the graphite. So if I do see that my lines tend to be all moving the same way, I'm just going to move the angle of the page slightly, the paper slightly, so that my lines now go over that area in a different direction. And again, I said this in, I think it was the last lesson or the previous one, lesson 49 or 48, I can't remember, but because I'm not going to the limit of every pencil, I'm not pressing on as hard as I can actually still develop a little bit of value with my 2H pencil, even in an area where we've already got 2B, HB, and an underlying layer of 2H. So again, I'm just going over this area now where I've applied the light coverage of 2B, and this constant working of the same area is just bringing the value up, even using my 2H pencil, which is brilliant because you don't have to have the entire spectrum of different pencils, so you don't need everything from a 9H all the way up to a 9B. You can get away with 4 or 5 pencils if you understand that we're going to build the value up gradually and in stages. And even my harder pencils can still add value to an area that has got some of the softer pencil in there as well. And it's a combination of those different amounts of pencil that give us this wonderful opportunity to play with values and these subtle changes of values. It's something that I strive to do with every drawing. I don't want just 3 different values, a dark value, a light value, and a mid-tone value, although that's ultimately what you are striving to do. You are trying to identify those 3 main values, but I want to have, yes, the very darkest, a highlighted area, but I want everything in between. And now what I think I'm going to really start to focus on is taking this 2H now towards the centre of this hand, or the arm, I guess the forearm it is. Because once I get some value in here, I'm going to be able to then figure out roughly the darkness and what sort of level of value I need in order to create the illusion that this forearm is rounded and has dimension to it, but also balancing it with the head itself, and that's why I've not gone anywhere near completion with the rest of the face. I've still got an awful lot of work to do in there, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like to work any one area into completion, is because I can see that this is darker than this. This is in shade and more shade than this. So I need to now start bringing value into this to balance it with the face. And if I would have just worked one area to completion, I would have found it more difficult to gauge. It would have been guesswork. And what that then means is if I've got it slightly wrong and I've taken, let's say, for example, I've taken this forearm too dark, I then need to really ramp up the value and the contrast in the head, which is just more work for me, and it's not necessarily needed. So I'm really going to now just start bringing the values from the left and from the right, because this is going to be slightly more highlighted, because this is a rounded object, it's a forearm, it isn't a flat surface, and I want to represent that with my pencil strokes. So the outer edges are going to always be darker, and it's going to taper in towards the middle section here, which is going to be lighter, and that is going to give us the illusion of shape, dimension, form, whatever you want to call it. And it's ultimately one of the main focal points for our eye. As our eye moves around the drawing, this arm is definitely something that if we get this wrong and we make this look too flat, or we make it look shiny by taking too much of a highlight out of certain areas, we don't want this to look like a metallic object. But if we get this wrong, because this is such a main focal area of the drawing, it's then going to ruin the illusion for the rest of the drawing. And in the same way that when you notice something, let's say somebody has something stuck to their face, maybe some excess food or something. Once you notice it, it's very, very difficult to unsee it. I often look at people, and once you start to notice somebody's eyebrows, it's all that you can see. You're just these two huge eyebrows on somebody's face, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with them, and they're perfectly finely formed eyebrows, but you notice something like that and it's forever there. And in the same way with something here, if I make something look out of place or bring particular attention to something that I don't want, that really is all that the viewer is going to then see, and you're going to struggle to take their attention away from it, no matter how well you've done with the rest of the drawing and the details. Don't forget to share your progress of any of the lessons that you're currently on. It doesn't matter if you're not right up to date and you're, drawing along with us with this Statue of Liberty landscape, portrait, I don't know, what do we call this? But it'd be really nice just to see your progress and just to introduce yourselves. We're well over 3,000 members now in the Facebook group, and it's a lovely group to be part of. I'm so pleased that I started it a few months back now. I only ever really thought that we were going to have a few people in there that were taking part in the lessons, but it's exceeded all of my expectations, and it's becoming a really nice place to sit down of an evening and have a look at people's work and answer people's comments and share ideas with one another. There's some brilliant artists in there, but there's a lot of beginners as well, and that's primarily what I wanted from this group and from these sessions. I wanted to be able to take somebody from what we would consider a beginner or somebody that hasn't got a huge amount of experience, and just give them the tools and the ideas and the framework really to be able to produce work from start to finish that they're really happy with, and they understand where the mistakes are. And we always can improve our work, but it's just something that, you know, I know I certainly spent a lot of time initially when I first started drawing 4 years ago. I spent a lot of time sort of bumbling around and not really understanding what I was doing, and trying charcoal and then trying coloured pencils and then coming back to graphite and trying different types of blending. And although it was all fantastic in terms of my learning, and I don't ever believe that a mistake is a mistake, it's just an opportunity to learn, it's another lesson. But I could have definitely streamlined my learning curve, my experience with graphite, certainly, if I had a series of lessons or something that gave me a structure right from the start. And that's really what my hope is for this series of videos and this group. So I'm kind of conscious now that we are sort of reaching that 30-minute mark. I like to try and keep the videos to about 30 minutes because it's a reasonable amount of time. We can get quite a bit of work done. You can certainly get the gist of what I'm trying to achieve in this session. And then I can allow you to just go ahead and carry on with that. So what I would say to you before the end of this, or before the start of next session, for the end of this session, continue bringing the 2H pencil now in towards the middle of this arm. Same with the thumb. Maybe work a little bit of the HB in there as well, working again from the outer edges. And then towards the end of this sort of session, it might take me another hour or so to get to where I want to be. What we'll hopefully have then is we'll have enough value and enough contrast in this arm to be able to then determine how much more work we need to do within this face area. And whether we need to add 2B or any of the slightly darker pencils anywhere on this arm, we're definitely going to need it in the torch itself. So continue with this methodical approach, tapered strokes, working from the darkest areas. Use your brush as you see fit. And let's see if we can have a rather decent coverage in this forearm area now, so that we're ready for the next session, which will be lesson number 50, where we can then start to add some of the details and bring some of the darker areas in the torch area. But as always, thank you so much for your support, comments, likes, shares. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and turn the notifications bell on. That means that you'll be notified as soon as I release a new video. I'm really enjoying the process, and it's been great seeing some of your work. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Hit subscribe, smack the notifications button, follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.